Hello everyone, and thank you all for tuning in once again to Tales by the Fire. Last episode, we saw a different perspective on Casimir's visit from the perspective of Dante. We learned that the relationship between Dante and Casimir are not as smooth as we once thought, and that Casimir would take Dante's life if something were ever to happen to Calla. After Casimir's visit, Calla finally succumbed to sleep deprivation after watching over Dante the past few nights. And now, Dante has taken her sleeping body to a town in Madokai for some rest. Will this town offer her the rest she needs, or offer her even more obstacles on her journey? Find out in this episode of Tales by the Fire. Chapter 9: A Fight and Fear. When I woke up, the sun was blindingly fierce against my sleep-filled eyes. I sat up slowly and looked around. I was in some sort of plaza. Near me was a large and beautiful fountain, although weather and lack of upkeep had done their toll on it. People here seemed busy and outgoing, and the shops were arranged in a homey fashion. However, what bothered me was that I couldn't remember how I got here. Had I fainted as we walked? Still, exhaustion clouded my thoughts, and I pressed a hand to my forehead.
"Hello, young lady,"
came a rough voice. I looked up, and there, leering at me, were two men. They appeared rough and unshaven, and had a general feeling of dirtiness about them. Hello, I said, trying to remember what little I had learned about interacting with others. The only ones I had spoken to over the past few years were a few servants, Nikolai, Casimir, my parents, and now Dante. But I had never actually met someone in an ordinary situation before.
"You're a pretty wench,"
one said with a laugh.
"I'd guess you were Dante's lover, but he's never been one to care about such things."
"Is Dante here?" I asked, still feeling like fog was surrounding my head. I coughed a few times before continuing. "Did he bring me here? I can't remember anything. But I must have fallen asleep since I was so tired and worn out." Apparently there was some humor in my words, because the two men started laughing.
"She's not Dante's lover. We were right,"
barked the taller one, laughing and spitting with every word.
"She's Dante's whore."
I flinched in surprise. That was a word I had heard very rarely, and only from the servants' idle chatter outside my cell door, but I had a general understanding of what it meant, and felt my heart pound with anger. I'm not his whore! I spat angrily, clenching my fists.
"Oh, so she has the nerve to deny it," laughed the other. "What term do you prefer, then? How about Dante's harlot, then?"
"No, I'm sure you'd prefer
courtesan.
Sounds so noble, does it not?"
Get away from me!"
I snarled, and felt my teeth and mouth elongate, as well as my fingernails. No, I couldn't change here, not in front of all the town people.
"Tell me, how much are you?"
provoked the first man, still grinning and showing putrid yellow teeth.
"Dante has always been cheap when it comes to buying goods. He's probably the same with his women. They aren't that much different after all."
My hand lashed out before I could stop it, My fingernails, now claws, tore across one side of his face, leaving 4 deep cuts across his cheek. He howled like an animal in pain as his blood dripped to the ground. I rose to my feet, prepared to fight, as the second man reached for a dagger at his belt, cursing at me. I snarled and struck out my hand, aiming at the man's throat, aiming to kill. I was faster than him. He couldn't hurt me, I realized, as everything seemed to move in slow motion. Suddenly, something slammed into my hand with blinding force, knocking it off target so that I sliced open the man's shoulder instead of his throat. He stabbed at me with his dagger, aiming for my heart, also aiming to kill. And I wondered briefly if my life would end there, before a flash of steel blocked the stab. I looked and saw Dante's broadsword between me and the other man. Dante stood there, pure fury on his face as he looked from me to the 2 men, quickly deciding what to do.
Dante!
The men and I both stuttered. Dante grabbed me roughly by the arm, and I stumbled after him as he dragged me into a nearby alley. Hauling me by the arm, he pulled me up some rickety stairs so quickly that I stumbled over a few. He then shoved me into a small room and entered after me, slamming and locking the door behind him. He released my arm as he stood a few feet away, not looking at me and breathing quickly. A strange fear filled my veins, and I was afraid of this man in front of me. More afraid of him even than those men in the square. My hand felt strangely warm, and I looked at it in confusion. I felt weak with nausea as blinding pain hit me. Embedded firmly in my hand is Dante's dagger, which he must have thrown to stop me from killing that man. Blood trickled from it in a steady stream and dripped to the floor, landing with the only sound in the silent room. I stood motionless, and slowly Dante looked at me, his eyes blazing and cold, like frozen fire.
Do you have any idea what the consequences of your killing that man would have been?
He asked, his voice furious.
Do you? You can't just kill people on the street in broad daylight. You'll be killed by the law, and I'll be killed along with you!
He shouted at me, and then turned away again. I'm sorry, I said through sharp teeth, panicked tears in my eyes. Never had I been shouted at before, not like this, and terror gripped me with icy claws. In my fear, I felt my ears change into animal ears. I slumped to the floor, trying to cover them with my uninjured hand, which was still clawed and bloody. "Get up," he said, and when I didn't move, he grabbed me by the arm and hauled me to my feet, setting me on the chair. I sat there, frozen, still covering my ears in fear. In silence, Dante turned and left, and I heard him lock the door once more behind him. I wondered absent-mindedly if he would return. I examined my hand, wincing in pain. Slowly I pulled at the dagger, trying to remove it from my hand. I whined softly and gritted my teeth, but I couldn't remove the blade without stopping from the pain. As I tried again, the door opened, and Dante strode back in, carrying our packs.
"What are you doing?"
he muttered, the fury gone from his voice. He dropped the packs and strode over to me.
"You're only going to cause more damage like that,"
he said, taking my good hand and removing it from his blade hilt. He grasped the hilt carefully with his long-fingered hand.
"This is going to hurt,"
he warned. I nodded, and to my surprise he offered me a handkerchief from his pocket.
"Clench this between your teeth so you don't have to bite your tongue,"
he ordered, and I took it from him, doing as he asked. Trying but failing to hide the revulsion in his eyes, he slowly lifted my clawed hand, grasping the dagger with the other. With one straight pull, the blade slid from my flesh, my teeth clenched tightly around the handkerchief, and my other hand clawed marks into the table. Dante set the dagger on the table and began to clean off the blade, dropping my hand as if it had burned him. Blood dripped more quickly from my hand, and I pressed my other hand onto it, not wanting to stay in Dante's handkerchief with my blood.
"Why isn't it healing?"
Dante asked after perhaps a minute or two. "My wounds don't heal instantly unless I'm fully changed when they're inflicted," I answered, stifling a cough. "But I still heal faster than normal, so it'll be fine in a few days," I added with an attempt at a smile. At my words, Dante reached to the packs and pulled out some strips of cloth that I had used to bandage his wounds. They were clean again, and he had obviously cleaned them. Carefully, he bandaged my hand, and slowly, as I relaxed, my claws receded and changed back into normal human fingernails.
"What happened to lead to that fight anyway?"
he asked me, looking at his handiwork carefully before dropping my hand and peering out the dusty window. "Those men came up to me and asked if I was your lover," I explained, trying to recall what had happened. I asked if they knew where you were, and tried to explain that I couldn't remember what happened because I was so worn out. Then they called me your whore, your harlot, and your courtesan. I glanced up from the tabletop. Dante didn't react to my words. I wondered if he was even listening. "One asked me how much I was, and said that I must have been cheap since you're cheap with your goods, and that women are basically the same," I finished, trailing off and returning my gaze to my bandaged hand.
"And then you tore his face off because he insulted you?"
Dante asked, his voice emotionless. I shook my head. "No, I deserve worse names than anything they could have come up with. But they insulted you, so then I tore their face off," I said. It was silent for a moment. Then Dante laughed once, quietly, but a laugh nonetheless.
"I suppose I don't blame you. Did the other one go for his dagger then?"
"Yes. I was going to kill him, because he was trying to kill me, but you stopped me. And thank you for that. And thank you for stopping his blow as well," I said through a yawn, suddenly tired. Perhaps from the stress of everything combined with not sleeping for several days, I let my head drop down to the table. I glanced around before my eyes closed, finally realizing where I was. I was in a small room in the inn with only 2 chairs, a table, 1 window, and a small bed. I sighed, pillowing my head on my arms.
"Get up,"
Dante said, pulling my arm roughly. I got to my feet, wondering if I had fallen asleep or not. "I'll just sleep on the floor. You can have the bed," I said through closed eyes, a senseless smile on my face.
"I'm not going to be here tonight. There's something I need to do in town,"
said Dante, lifting me off the ground for a moment, before tossing me onto the straw mattress. It was comfortable and soft compared to what I had at home, so I nestled in. I felt Dante throw a soft, warm blanket over me, and I murmured my thanks before letting sleep take me. That was Chapter 9 of Marked. It was written by Darkhawk14 and posted on fictionpress.com. Thank you all for listening. If you'd like to read the story in its entirety, then you can check out Darkhawk14's fictionpress.com page in the description. And like always, I'll see you all next week on Tales by the Fire.